The film begins by showing a riot occurring in a housing project area. The clash happens because protesters are opposing the construction of a luxury housing project on the land. The protesters, led by an elderly man named Sumith, firmly reject the development and fight for their rights, as the government has seized their land and sold it to corporate construction tycoons. Despite the clashes having continued for 8 months, the Thai government appears confident that the unrest will not disrupt the functioning of the government, and they proceed with organizing the International Economic Development Plan to be held in Bangkok. Additionally, as the host of this state event, Thailand is also prepared to welcome business leaders from various countries. When the business leaders are attending a presentation about the world-class luxury housing complex to be built in Bangkok, the protesters at the riot site attempt to voice their opposition to the project. Amidst the chaos, a rescue worker named Wanchai tries to assist both the protesters and the injured police officers. The clashes escalate when the police begin shooting at the protesters who are the most vocal in their opposition. Seeing their comrades fall one by one, the protesters become enraged and blindly attack the police. Meanwhile, Wanchai and his friend, Pond, try to save a young man who has been shot by the police and rush him to an ambulance. As they were about to leave the scene, Wanchai witnesses a man being shot in front of him, so he quickly rushes to help the man, asking Pond to assist him. However, at the same time, a grenade explodes near Pond, engulfing his body in flames. Seeing this, Wanchai immediately takes Pond to the ambulance, but he gets trapped in the escalating chaos as the police start firing tear gas to suppress the increasingly violent protesters. As Wanchai sought refuge in an abandoned building, he accidentally encountered a group of protesters who mistook him for a police officer and attacked him. To make matters worse, when Wanchai tried to escape, he was confronted by the police, who mistook him for a protester and shot him. Some time later, Wanchai is seen in the hospital, and one of his colleagues informs him that the young man he saved has survived, but Pond's condition remains critical. Since Wanchai disobeyed his superior's orders and endangered his own life as well as his team's, the head of the Ruampalangji Foundation, Aunt Malaya, decides to suspend him temporarily. Soon after, Wanchai visits Pond in the hospital, but his wife is furious upon seeing him, blaming him for her husband's severe injuries. Having been suspended from his job as a paramedic, Wanchai then works as a food delivery courier, working day and night to support Pond's family. That night, Pond's wife, receives a notification on her phone that Wanchai has transferred some money into their bank account. Feeling guilty about the tragic incident that befell Pond, Wanchai decided to help his friend's family financially. Elsewhere, a middle-aged man named Sin is seen punishing people who have cheated in his underground casino. Soon after, Sin receives a phone call from his boss, who offers him a job with a substantial payment. The scene then shifts to a female nurse named Meiji, who is waiting for her order. Meiji calls the courier, who turns out to be Wanchai, and asks him to deliver her order to the VIP parking area at a hospital. Shortly after, Wanchai manages to deliver Meiji's order on time, but at that moment, they witness a man attempting to kidnap a girl. The man is revealed to be Sin, and he successfully kills the girl's bodyguards. As Sin and his men are about to leave, the panicked and terrified Meiji screams hysterically. At that moment, Wanchai tries to silence her, but she has already exposed their presence, prompting Sin to point his pistol at them and order them to come with him. At the same time, one of Sin's companions, a man named Chop, informs him that the girl's bodyguards will arrive soon. Upon hearing this, Sin quickly instructs Wanchai to swap their car for an ambulance, and he pretends to be a patient to deceive them. Along the way, Sin's condition worsens due to a gunshot wound in his abdomen. Realizing this, Wanchai tells them that he used to be a medic and they need to listen to him if they want to save Sin's life. Under his direction, Meiji begins performing emergency medical treatment to keep Sin alive, while the girl's bodyguards continue to pursue them. In the midst of traffic, Chop spots several flower sellers approaching the vehicle driven by the girl's bodyguards and realizes they plan to disguise themselves as flower sellers to conceal their weapons. As a result, Chop quickly informs Sin, and fortunately, Wanchai also notices this, so he swiftly drives the ambulance out of the traffic. During the tense chase, Wanchai hesitates as the police are also after them. However, Sin threatens to kill them if Wanchai doesn't drive faster. With no other choice, Wanchai complied, allowing them to evade the police, while Chop confronted and successfully killed the girls' bodyguards. Unfortunately, one of the vehicles manages to catch up to them, forcing Sin to reluctantly engage in a shootout with the girls' bodyguards. During this moment, Sin successfully kills the bodyguards, but Wan Chai is shot in the abdomen. Despite this, he continues driving until they reach the housing project area, which was the site of the earlier riot. As Wan Chai drives through the crowd, he recalls the tragic incident he experienced while trying to save people there. Shortly afterward, they arrive in a slum area, where the residents are in a dire state, as if abandoned by the government. When Wan Chai and the others step out of the ambulance, they're surrounded by people desperately seeking medical help. Because the crowd was pressuring them, Sin's son, Bank, fired a warning shot to disperse them, which was immediately scolded by Sin. At the same time, Wan Chai secretly began planning an escape with Meiji and the girl. However, Sin managed to stop their action, while Bank chased after the girl, who ran deeper into the slum area. During her escape attempt, the girl, Duankamal, accidentally discovered that the slum was being used as a base by gangsters involved in various criminal activities. They had built a drug factory there and forced women into labor. Not only that, but they were also involved in human trafficking, selling organs, and using the bodies to smuggle drugs. Additionally, to carry out these criminal activities, they collaborated with corrupt medical personnel who were responsible for transporting the bodies using ambulances. Elsewhere, the leader of Duankamal's bodyguards, Nat, managed to gather information about the kidnappers, but they assumed that Wan Chai and Meiji were part of the kidnappers' gang. Knowing they were currently in the slum area near the protest site, thanks to the GPS necklace tracking Duankamal, Nat ordered his team to go there and rescue Duankamal. However, upon their arrival, his men were confronted by the gangster boss, Darley, who then trapped them and ordered his men to kill them. Meanwhile, as Wan Chai and Meiji tried to locate Duankamal under Sin's orders, Sin unexpectedly collapsed as his condition worsened. Seeing this, Wan Chai intended to help him, but Meiji stopped him. Torn between decisions, Wan Chai shouted for help and left Sin behind. In their attempt to find Duankamal, Wan Chai and Meiji were discovered by Darley's men, who then chased them. Fortunately, a local resident offered them a hiding spot, although they had to give up their valuables in exchange. On the other hand, Sin was confronted by Chop, who asserted that from now on, he would lead the team because Sin had messed everything up. At the same time, Duankamal sought help from a middle-aged woman, but the woman handed her over to the gangsters involved in the human trafficking syndicate. Luckily, Bank managed to find Duankamal and freed her along with the other children. Soon after, Wan Chai and Meiji, who were hiding in a car, were discovered by Sumitha's men, who informed them that their boss needed medical assistance. However, Darley's men confronted them, leading to a shootout between the two factions. In the midst of the battle, Sin and Chop suddenly appeared, throwing tear gas and starting to shoot at them one by one. As a result, Wan Chai and Meiji were recaptured by Sin, who ordered them to treat him. Shortly thereafter, Sin offered a deal to Wan Chai and Meiji to help him find the girl. Both seemed interested because Sin offered a substantial cash reward if they agreed to assist him. Meanwhile, Darley was furious upon learning that his younger brother had been killed in the shootout against Sin and Chop. Elsewhere, a corrupt medical officer named Jack and her men were confronted by Nat, who had come there following the GPS signal from his men. Upon discovering that his men had been killed, Nat aimed his pistol at Jack and ordered her to take him to the gangster boss. While Wan Chai and Meiji shared stories about their past and the reasons they agreed to help Sin, Bank and Duankamal were on the rooftop of a building, hiding from those pursuing them. Duankamal then informed Bank that she had a heart condition and could die at any moment. Upon hearing that, Bank recounted his dark past, which had traumatized him so much that he always experienced panic attacks and anxiety disorders. As a child, Bank witnessed his mother being brutally murdered by robbers. Fortunately, Sin was able to kill the robbers and save him. But ever since that incident, Bank had been haunted by that horrific event, leaving him deeply traumatized to this day. As a result, Bank easily panicked and became anxious, which made him unsuitable to be a criminal. Soon after, Sin and the others devised a plan for Bank to find them. Wan Chai then stood on top of the ambulance, activating a signal light so he could locate them. Bank, seeing the signal, hurriedly took Duankamal away from there, while Darley and his men pursued them. At that moment, Sin fired shots at Darley's men to stop them, while Chop detonated the homemade bomb he had prepared. Amid the fierce gunfight, Wanchai tried to rescue Duankamal and get her away from there. They then ran toward the ambulance, while Darley and his men chased after them. Furious, Darley ordered his men to shoot the ambulance immediately, but Wanchai and the others managed to escape through the sewers. They successfully escaped from the pursuit of Darley and his men, but unexpectedly, Chop then took Meiji hostage and threatened to kill her if Wanchai did not hand over Duankamal to him. To save Meiji's life, Wanchai reluctantly agreed to surrender Duankamal to Chop. At the same time, Chop turned to Sin and confidently challenged him to a weapon duel. Despite being injured, Sin proved his skill as a marksman by easily defeating Chop. Meanwhile, Darley, returning to his headquarters, was shocked to find Nat and his men who had killed the gangsters to avenge the deaths of his team. Nat then killed all of Darley's men present there and demanded that he reveal the location of the girl. However, Darley, not wanting his business to go bankrupt, offered a deal to Nat. Apparently, Darley agreed to help Nat find the girl and kill Sumith and his men, as long as Nat allowed him to continue running his illegal business. Because Darley had many spies in the area, it was very easy for him to locate Sumith's hideout, enabling the police to raid and permanently stop the unrest. Upon hearing that, Nat seemed interested and agreed to cooperate with Darley. Surprisingly, Korn, one of Darley's surviving men, reported their plan to Sumith. At that moment, he informed Sumith that Darley had betrayed him and intended to use the protesters as a kidnapping plot so that the police would have a strong reason to kill them in order to save the girl. Additionally, Korn also informed his boss about Darley's betrayal. Unexpectedly, the boss also relayed the information to their leader, who was none other than Aunt Malaye. On the other hand, Nat called his boss, who was Duankamal's father, to share his plan. Apparently, Nat intended to create a scenario in which Sumith and his men kidnapped Duankamal for revenge and demanded a ransom. Soon after, the clashes were escalating as a group of people provoked the anger of the masses by secretly shooting a protester and claiming that the police had shot him. Meanwhile, Wanchai and the others met a man named Judd, who then took them to the other side of the settlement, far from the clash location. At that moment, Meiji helped a woman clean her wounds and appeared happy when the woman called her an angel. On the other hand, Duankamal was seen sharing food with Judd's daughter, Koi, when Judd came and asked her to take a picture together. Unexpectedly, Judd turned out to be one of Darley's henchmen and sent the photo to Darley, revealing their location. As they traversed the tunnel with Judd acting as their guide, Duankamal informed Bank that Judd was not Koi's father. As a result, Sin immediately strangled Judd to death, while Darley's men waited for them at the end of the tunnel, fully armed. Elsewhere, Aunt Malaye was holding a meeting with her group involved in the drug and human trafficking business that she secretly operated within the slum area. Realizing that Darley had caused chaos, Aunt Malaye planned to make Sumith and his men scapegoats for the kidnapping and unrest. Amid the increasingly brutal clashes as the police managed to breach the protesters' blockade, Aunt Malaye's henchmen began their actions to eliminate all evidence and witnesses related to their illegal business. On the other hand, Sin received a message from his boss stating that the job was canceled and ordered him to kill the girl. Realizing that Darley's men had left the tunnel, Wanchai and the others attempted to escape to the end of the tunnel, the only way out of the place. When they reached the end of the tunnel, the place suddenly collapsed, blocking their exit. Duankamal, standing near the tunnel's exit, was nearly crushed by the rubble, but fortunately, Sin managed to save her, although he collapsed unconscious. With a strong determination to save as many lives as possible, even if they were criminals, Wanchai tried to help Sin by performing CPR. Upon seeing that, Meiji urged him to stop and let Sin die because he was the one who had involved them in the kidnapping. However, when Meiji saw Wanchai so determined to save Sin's life, she became touched and took turns with him to perform CPR. Fortunately, Sin was successfully saved and they rushed out of the tunnel. Despite this, they soon found themselves trapped in the chaos and became separated from one another. When they finally regrouped, Nat's men, disguised as police, noticed their presence and immediately captured Duankamal. They were then ordered to kill Wanchai and the others, but Sin quickly shot them one by one. Because of this, Wanchai and Meiji rushed to take Duankamal away, but Darley's men arrived and opened fire on them. At that moment, Meiji was shot and fell, but she then pushed Wanchai and Duankamal inside and closed the gate, allowing them to escape while she prepared to face Darley's men, even though her life was at stake. Meanwhile, Wanchai and the others were confronted by Jack and her henchmen, who knew that they were the ones being hunted by Darley. Soon after, Darley and his men appeared, and he seemed to have known Sin for quite a long time. Sin then instructed Wanchai to retrieve the gun from his back pocket to fight Darley's men and protect Duankamal. A gunfight between them became inevitable, causing them to become separated from one another. At that moment, Wanchai managed to defeat several of Darley's men, but Sin found himself cornered, prompting him to tell Bank to hide. Soon after that, Wanchai and Duankamal managed to escape by boarding an ambulance, then rescued Sin from the shootout. When they arrived at a dock, Wanchai devised a plan and successfully defeated Darley's men, while Sin managed to kill Darley. However, just as they were about to leave, Nat appeared and shot Sin. At that moment, Nat ordered Wanchai to surrender Duankamal, revealing that he was the girl's bodyguard. Nat then took them away, but during the journey, Duankamal realized that Nat was not taking her home and intended to hand her over to Sin's boss for a monetary reward. Knowing this, Sin insisted that the job had been canceled, but Nat didn't believe him and threatened to kill Bank if he refused to tell him where they should deliver Duankamal. Although Sin had been honest, Nat did not trust him and instead ordered his men to kill Bank. Sin was devastated to see his son killed before his eyes, and he also felt guilty because he had never been a good father to him. In fact, he had even forbidden Bank from calling him his father. When they arrived at the port, Nat intended to kill them, but Sin quickly shot his men, killing them all. Sin also managed to wound Nat, but he got back up and shot Sin dead. Soon after that, a gang of locals arrived after hearing the gunfire. They paid no attention to Nat, who claimed to be a police officer, and shot him down. As they were about to kill Wanchai and Duankamal, one of the gang members who was in a wheelchair quickly stopped them and revealed that Wanchai was the one who had saved his life during the recent riots. It turned out that the gang member was the young man whom Wanchai had rescued during the clashes. Because of this, they allowed Wanchai and Duankamal to leave as a reward for him, saving one of their gang members. Meanwhile, Meiji had managed to survive Darley's men's attack because the citizens rallied to defend her, and at the same time, the police arrived to apprehend all of Darley's men. After the riots that night, the protests subsided, and all the citizens and volunteers worked together to clean up the area. The government then decided to cancel the elite housing project, a decision that was well received by the citizens. Additionally, Wanchai also received an award for his heroic actions in saving many lives, including Duankamal, while they were trapped in the riots. Sometime later, Duankamal, who had successfully returned to her father, was seen being treated in a hospital when she received a video call from Meiji, who revealed that she had now become a medical officer and was working alongside Wanchai. Moral lesson from the story: if you ever find yourself in a chaotic protest, remember that helping others is great, but dodging bullets while delivering food is just plain silly. So, always check your GPS and your gut. One might save your life.